Good afternoon, everyone. Everyone already knows Helena. She's a strong part of our group. But in case you didn't know, she was invited to do a plenary talk in a conference that's occurring next week on the Encontro de Química e Física, right? So yes. I would like to let you then start your talk. Good luck.
Thank you, Mariam. So good afternoon to everyone. So as Mariam said, this is more or less the presentation that I will do next week in this national conference. For today, in the introduction, a few slides are slightly different to be this more dedicated to the people that is listened today. So my presentation title is From Biocatalysis to Metal Separation, the versatility of ionic-liquid-based aqueous biphasic systems. So if we have new students listen to us, and just to do a brief introduction to the group, our research group, PATH, dedicated a good amount of work on the better understanding of aqueous biphasic system formation and their potential applications. So PATH Research Group is part of the associated laboratory CISECO at the University of Aveiro, and currently is coordinated by Professor João Coutinho, Dr. Mara Freire, and Professor Sonia Ventura. This group was born more or less 20 years ago, and in the beginning it was dedicated to the study of applied thermodynamics. However, PATH grew up in age and number of persons, and nowadays it has people working in several other scientific areas in domains of chemical engineering, chemistry, biochemistry, and biotechnology. If you have any interest to know a little bit more about PATH, you can follow us through the website or the social networks. So the most part of you already listen about aqueous biphasic systems and ionic liquids, but if someone that doesn't know so well what they are, I will do a brief explanation. So aqueous biphasic systems appear as more benign liquid-liquid separation systems, since these are composed of two immiscible aqueous phases. So ABS can be formed by the mixture of two water-soluble solids, for example, two polymers, a salt and a polymer, or two salts in an aqueous solution. And basically, these solids will compete for the formation of hydration complexes, and what we call a salting out effect will occur, resulting in the formation of two immiscible aqueous phases, as represented in this figure. Almost 20 years ago, it was reported for the first time that aqueous biphasic systems can also be prepared by the mixture of an ionic liquid with a salt in aqueous solution. So due to the presence of ionic liquids, this type of ABS presents additional advantages when compared with more conventional systems. For example, low viscosity and quick phase separation, and also a high and tailored extraction efficiencies for several compounds. But what are ionic liquids? Usually we define an ionic liquid as a salt with a melting point below 100 degrees Celsius. Ionic liquids are commonly composed of a large organic cation and an organic or inorganic anion. And contrarily to what is observed in conventional salts, ionic liquid ions present low symmetry, low charge density, and low intermolecular interactions. And are these characteristics that are responsible for the low melting points observed in ionic liquids. Furthermore, and still due to their compositions, ionic liquids exhibit unique properties such as negligible vapor pressure, high thermal and chemical stability, and high solvation ability for several compounds. However, what makes ionic liquids truly special is the possibility of tuning their properties to fit a specific requirement by the change of both the cation and the anion that compose the ionic liquid. So the number of possible combinations is so high that ionic liquids are commonly designated as designer solvents. So I think that now it's simple to understand that when we combine all the advantages of these alternative solvents with the advantages of aqueous biphasic systems, we are inducing the formation of tailored and highly effective systems which are valuable to be applied in processes of extraction and separation of a wide range of compounds. So our group, among other authors, studied ionic-liquid-based aqueous biphasic systems in deep and tried to develop new, tailored, and better performing systems. In this context, today I would like to show you 4 examples of how we can use ABS and how versatile these systems can be. And the first example that I would like to show you is about the development and application of thermoreversible ionic-liquid-based aqueous biphasic systems. So as a brief introduction, the ability to induce reversible phase transitions between homogeneous solutions and biphasic liquid-liquid systems is very important when we are designing separation and purification processes. It was already demonstrated that phase transition in mixtures involving hydrophobic ionic liquids and other solvents can be induced by changes in temperature or even by reversible reactions with CO2. However, most of the binary liquid-liquid systems composed of ionic liquids typically occur at temperatures far from room temperature and are confined to mixture compositions imposed by the upper or lower critical points of the phase diagrams. So thus, it is important to find alternatives. And the question that we tried to answer in this work was if ionic liquid-based aqueous biphasic systems are an alternative. With this aim, we studied the temperature effect on binodal curves of ABS composed of protic-ionic liquids and polypropylene glycol. And when we observed that binodal curves of these aqueous biphasic systems were significantly affected by small changes in temperature, we understood that these systems were potential candidates to the development of thermoreversible systems. So how we can use them? Basically, imagine that you prepare this mixture point presented here. At 25 degrees Celsius, we will have a monophasic system. However, if we increase the temperature to 45 degrees Celsius, the same mixture point will become a biphasic system. If we decrease again the temperature, it will come back to be a monophasic system. And this is what we call a thermoreversible behavior. Furthermore, this thermoreversible behavior can be applied as many times as desired without changes in the composition of the coexisting phases. And there are other advantages. For example, now temperature range of operation can be selected based on the ternary mixture composition to fit the requirements of a specific process, and is no more restricted to fixed temperatures imposed by the thermodynamic nature of the binary liquid-liquid system. Proof of the thermoreversibility of these systems, their application was evaluated for separation processes, here by using 2 added value proteins, the cytochrome C and azocasein. For that, we start for preparing a monophasic ternary mixture at 25 degrees Celsius, and remarkably, the total extraction of both proteins to ionic liquid-rich phase was attained in a single step when temperature was increased up to 45 degrees Celsius. Furthermore, the cyclic reversibility between monophasic and biphasic regimes, driven by a decrease and increase in temperature, was demonstrated with 3 cooling heating cycles with no losses on the extraction efficiencies obtained for both proteins. So in this work, we were able to show that the temperature-driven reversible behavior of ionic liquid-based aqueous biphasic systems allows them to be used as dynamic separation platforms. But we were able to go a little bit further. And this takes us on the second example that I want to show you. Despite the interest in the development of dynamic and reversible ionic liquid-based aqueous biphasic systems, there was a gap on the use of this type of ABS as integrated processes. So we demonstrated that water-soluble ammonium-based zwitterions derived from ionic liquids can also be used to induce the formation of thermoreversible ABS when mixed with inorganic salts. Zwitterions were first suggested as alternatives to ionic liquids since the cation and the anion are covalently bonded, and thus we may avoid possible ion exchange between the ABS coexisting phases. However, what is more important is that these systems demonstrated a high dependence with the temperature, allowing to trigger phase transitions by small changes on the temperature. And more interesting is that depending on the size of the alkyl chain of the zwitterion, we can move from an upper critical solution temperature type behavior to a lower critical solution temperature type behavior, allowing the design of their thermal behavior at temperatures amenable to deal with several types of biomolecules. Thus, and considering their high potential as thermoreversible systems, we studied their potential application as integrated reaction separation processes. Since the use of salts may lead to biocompatibility concerns when we are dealing with solids sensitive to ionic strength, for example, enzymes, the salts were substituted by polymers. And by determining the binodal curves at different temperatures, it was possible to confirm that, as previously, zwitterion polymer-based ABS also present two distinct behaviors with temperature, evidencing a change from a salt-like to a polymer-like behavior, which depends on the zwitterion alkyl chain length. After this, we evaluated the temperature reversible behavior of these systems and its application to the development of an integrated reaction separation biocatalytic process. For this, the homogeneous biocatalytic oxidation of the substrate ABTS by the biocatalyst lacase was carried out in the monophasic region and followed by the separation of lacase from the oxidation product by promoting the phase separation by temperature changes. For the two studied thermoreversible ABS, it was observed that lacase successfully catalyzed the oxidation of ABTS to a high stable green color radical. After that, a temperature change was applied, which induced the separation of the system into two phases and allowed the selective separation of the oxidized substrate and lacase. The results also shows that the oxidized ABTS preferentially migrates to the PEG-rich phase, while lacase is enriched in the opposite phase. Furthermore, a remarkable extraction efficiency of 100% was obtained with one of these zwitterions, which means that lacase and the oxidized ABTS are completely separated for opposite phase in a single step and with no losses or cross-contamination. Finally, it was confirmed that lacase maintains its biocatalytic activity after the separation step, which allows us to recover and reuse not only the lacase, but also the zwitterion-rich phase, and thus contribute to the development of a sustainable biocatalytic process. So thus, it was demonstrated in this work that thermoreversible aqueous biphasic systems, in this case composed of ammonium-based zwitterions, can be used as integrated production separation platforms. But aqueous biphasic systems are not only restricted to be used in biochemical reactions or separations. It is also possible to use ABS for other applications, for example, for metal extraction. The application of aqueous biphasic system to the extraction and separation of metals was always limited by the system's low stability at acidic pH, which is required when we are working with metals. So thus, and aiming to solve this gap, acidic aqueous biphasic systems were developed. In these systems, basically, we substitute the salt that is normally used to induce the formation of ABS by an acid. And the development of these acidic aqueous biphasic systems bring us a large number of new possibilities and opportunities to use aqueous biphasic systems. However, their formation mechanism is complex and different from the mechanism that rules the conventional aqueous biphasic systems. I will have no time to give you details on this topic, but still, I want to show you what is more important to retain. So first, only ionic liquids composed of cations with a more neutral surface charge, such as tetraalkyl ammonium and tetraalkyl phosphonium cations, with long alkyl chains, are able to induce the formation of these systems. This is basically related with cation charge shielding by the large alkyl chains of this type of ionic liquids, and consequently their lower interactions with water. On the other hand, the acid role in the formation of these systems is mainly controlled by two factors. First, the acid speciation, and second, the extent of the ion exchange. For example, based on the Hofmeister series that is used to explain the salt ability to induce ABS, we were expecting that phosphoric acid presented the highest ability to form an acidic ABS. However, this acid was not even able to induce the phase separation. And this is thus because this acid is partially not dissociated or partially dissociated in the form of H2PO4-, and thus it has no strength to induce the phase splitting. In a similar way, we were also expecting that nitric acid presented the lowest capability to form acidic ABS. However, and again, the opposite result was observed. In fact, in the presence of nitric acid, the anion exchange between chloride anion from ionic liquid and the nitrate anion from the acid is complete and occurs the formation of a no fully water-soluble ionic liquid, which means that this system is composed by the nitric acid is no more a real acidic aqueous biphasic system, but a more conventional system composed of an organic phase and an aqueous phase. Acidic aqueous biphasic systems also present thermoresponsive behavior, more specifically a lower critical solution temperature type behavior. However, when we studied the temperature influence on the range of acid and ionic liquid concentrations, we observed a non-linear behavior, which suggests that different types of mechanisms rule the temperature influence in the different regions of this phase diagram. So these systems can thus be used on metals extraction, and metal extraction will depend on the type of metal complex that is formed in the aqueous solution. If a negative complex occurs in the aqueous solution, then the ion exchange between negative charged metal complex and the ionic liquid anion will induce the extraction of metal complex ion pair to the ionic liquid rich phase. Furthermore, by changing the type of acid that compose the acidic aqueous biphasic systems, we can tune the ability of these systems to partition and separate different types of metals, as shown in this picture. So let's consider a practical example, the extraction and separation of transition metals from spent nickel metal hydride batteries. First, metal leaching from batteries matrix is carried out by using a concentrated acid solution, for example, chlorhydric acid. Then the solution is used in the preparation of an acidic ABS by adding the ionic liquid to the mixture in the right proportion. Here we can see the partition of cobalt, nickel, and manganese in function of chlorhydric acid concentration. And metal extraction is ruled by their complexation constant. So metals with higher complexation constants will be able to form anionic complexes in the presence of high concentration of ions, such as chloride. And consequently, an hydrophobic pair composed of this metallic anion complex and ionic liquid cation will induce the partition of metal to ionic liquid rich phase. Here, particularly, we can see the selective separation between cobalt and nickel. What is a remarkable result, because it is well known that separation between cobalt and nickel is quite hard to attain. So, two examples of how we can work with acidic ABS. In the first one, after to obtain the leachate rich in transition metals such as cobalt and nickel, by the addition of the correct amount of ionic liquid, we can induce the formation of an acidic ABS and separate metals based on their complexation constants. However, imagine that we would like to use a lower amount of acid. After the addition of ionic liquid, what we need to do is to heat the solution and induce the phase separation. In this particular case, we only have cobalt in solution, and you can see that cobalt extraction is not complete. This happened because chloride concentration in solutions is low and is not enough to coordinate with all cobalt and result in the complete extraction. So after metal separations, we can try to recover metals from acidic aqueous biphasic system phases by electrode position. However, when we try to carry out the electrode position of cobalt directly from ionic liquid-rich phase, it was observed that the presence of even a small concentration of HCl, which induced the formation of hydronium in solution, inhibits the electrode position of cobalt. Furthermore, the concentration of HCl needed to guarantee that cobalt is efficiently extracted and separated is about 8 molar of HCl. So thus, we found that a possible way to solve this question is to add to the acidic ABS a small amount of sodium chloride. The addition of only 4 weights% of sodium chloride results in a high decrease on the concentration of acid that is needed to induce the formation of an acidic ABS. Furthermore, the addition of this amount of sodium chloride to our system doesn't affect in a negative way the selective partition of cobalt and nickel. And adding to that, we can decrease the concentration of hydronium in the ionic liquid-rich phase. So by the addition of just 4 weights% of sodium chloride to our acidic aqueous biphasic system, it was possible to promote the electrode position of cobalt directly in the ionic liquid-rich phase. Furthermore, it was also observed that the electrode position efficiency can be significantly improved by ionic liquid-rich phase dilution in water, and the deposit's crystal structure and morphology can also be tuned by these changes in the phase composition. So all these findings suggest that acidic aqueous biphasic systems stand out as an efficient, flexible, and integrated extraction separation purification platform for the recovery of metals, namely critical metals. So I do believe that the 3 previous examples are enough to show you how versatile ionic liquid-based ABS can be and how we can play with their properties to fit the requirements of a specific process. But I would like to close this presentation by showing you a last example that, in my opinion, is a good example of how our curiosity and sometimes just the right question in the right moment can result in an outstanding finding. As I referred previously, it is well known that there are different types of aqueous biphasic systems, and these can be formed, for example, by the mixture of an ionic liquid with a polymer with a salt, or even an ionic liquid with a salt. So suddenly, the question that appears on the table was, what happens if we mix an ionic liquid with a polymer and a salt in the same aqueous solution? Is it possible to induce the formation of an aqueous system with more than 2 phases in equilibrium by using this quaternary mixture? Yes, it is. We were able to demonstrate that with the correct choice and mixture of a polymer, a salt, and an ionic liquid in the same aqueous solution, it's possible to induce the formation of a system with 3 aqueous phases. And we not only proved the possibility of forming an aqueous multiphase system, but we were also able to understand the mechanism that rules this behavior. So basically, we evaluated the ability of 7 different colinium-based ionic liquids to induce the formation of this type of systems when mixed with polyethylene glycol and 3-potassium phosphate. And we observed that all ionic liquids studied, with the exception of colinium propanoate and colinium butanoate, were able to form a 3-phase system. We compared this ability to the capacity of all these ionic liquids being able to form normal aqueous biphasic systems with the polymer and the salt. And we conclude that if all the 3 pairs, salt, ionic liquid, polymer, and polymer salt, are able to form ABS, then we will observe the formation of an aqueous multiphase system when all the 3 are mixed in the same aqueous solution. On the other hand, if one of these pairs fail on the formation of aqueous biphasic systems, we will only be able to obtain an aqueous 2-phase system and never a system with 3 phases in equilibrium. So, in summary, a triple salting out effect is a crucial phenomenon which rules the formation of this type of systems. By the analytical quantification of the coexisting phases of the selenium chloride-based system, we also proved that there is no ion exchange in this type of systems, and each of them is composed of an ionic liquid-rich phase, a polymer-rich phase, and a salt-rich phase. We also studied the temperature effect, and we observed that the phase, in all the range of the phase diagram, an increase in the temperature favored the phase separation. Finally, we demonstrate the potential application of these systems in the separation of complex mixtures of several types of compounds. And particularly here, you can see the selective separation of 3 textile dyes, which is ruled basically by their octanol water partition coefficients. So the most hydrophilic dye, the Prussian blue, is extracted to the most hydrophilic phase of our system, the most hydrophobic one for the most hydrophobic phase. And for example, chloranylic acid partition between both ionic liquid and polymer rich phase. And we can tune the partition of this textile dye by just changing the anion that compose the ionic liquid. So in summary, we are not stuck in systems composed of 2 aqueous-rich phases. We can work with systems with 3 aqueous-rich phases, which allow us to separate much more complex mixture, and which phase properties can be even tuned by the correct selection of the polymer, salt, ionic liquid, anion, and cation that compose them. So despite these works are just few examples of how we can use and tune ABS composed of ionic liquids to be used in the extraction and separation of different compounds, I think these are enough to show you how much versatile ionic liquid-based aqueous biphasic systems can be. These are truly dynamic, tailored, and efficient liquid-liquid systems, being the most important to think out of the box, find new interesting applications, and try to go further. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, I'll open the floor for a discussion.
Thank you, Mario.
In case everyone is feeling shy.
Someone knows how much time did I take?
It was approximately 25 minutes.
Okay, so inside of what I was expecting.
Exactly.
So at least let me know if the content of the presentation is easy to understand or to follow. I know it's a lot of information, so.
É demasiada informação, mas não é suposto as pessoas acompanharem tudo. Isto é para te dar uma noção daquilo que fazes. Não é para elas perceberem tudo, não estás a dar uma aula.
Sim. Mas o que lhe pareceu?
Claro, bem montada a estrutura, seguiu-se muito bem. Agora é difícil nós que estamos por dentro fazer uma avaliação isenta destas coisas, porque a gente percebe muito bem o que estás a falar e a relação entre aquelas coisas todas. Dito isto, eu acho que é uma apresentação muito rica, que mostra que tu fazes uma variedade enorme de coisas e o potencial destes sistemas. Eu gostei muito da maneira como ela está montada, achei que estava muito bem e tu estiveste muito bem a apresentar. Não sei se alguém tem uma opinião contrária, que seria mais interessante. Sónia, tu já foste à cabeleireira, tu não podias esperar.
Eram
Mal te permitiram, tu foi logo.
Fui logo cortar o meu cabelo. Cabelinho branco.
Estás bem.
Vamos ver qual de nós vai ficar melhor de cabelo branco, não é? Eu concordo, portanto, eu sei que se calhar o professor estava à espera de uma resposta negativa, eu concordo, acho que, e tu sabes, Helena, que este não é propriamente este tipo de trabalho não é aquilo que eu gosto mais, na realidade, mas isto acaba por nos mostrar algumas potencialidades dos sistemas, não é? Mas, e até destes mais complexos. E eu tinha uma curiosidade, pode ser uma pergunta também, e que eventualmente poderia ser interessante pensar, não digo para me responderes agora, mas pensar no sentido de, se alguém te fizer esse tipo de pergunta, que tu possas ter alguma ideia, que era, em relação aos sistemas multifásicos, se tu tens alguma ideia de onde é que eles poderiam ter, para além do exemplo que mostraste, mas que parece-me que é mais uma prova de conceito do que algo que fosse aplicável na realidade, mas tens alguma ideia onde é que isso possa ser introduzido? Ou...
Assim, particularmente neste trabalho nós fizemos vários testes com diferentes misturas, diferentes tipos de compostos. Portanto, o conceito é esse. 3 fases, misturas mais complexas, poderias aplicar em, como é que é dizer, basta pensar naquilo que fazes em laboratório, mesmo quando fazemos extrações sólido-líquidos, de biomassa e afins, tens múltiplos componentes dentro da tua mistura. Em vez de pensares apenas em separar 2, poderias pensar em separar 3. A verdade é que nós, agora aqui, para nós, não é? A verdade é que nós nunca aplicamos estes sistemas em nada mais específico, porque tem uma complexidade muito superior aos ABS, e mesmo no que respeita à separação de fases e à recuperação dos compostos a partir das fases, estamos a falar de uma coisa muito mais complicada. Mas no fundo é muito este o conceito. Tens que ter em consideração é que as 3 fases têm características muito diferentes, e para conseguir separar também tens de ter compostos com características muito diferentes.
Não experimentaste aplicar isto às misturas de metais?
Não conseguimos por causa do pH, em particular com este sistema, porque temos nós tentamos, na verdade, mas não funcionou de todo, porque nós estamos com, neste caso em particular, o sistema que nós fizemos esta prova dos trifásicos, nós usamos fosfato de potássio, portanto temos um pH altamente básico e não conseguimos extrair nada com metais. Mas sim, o conceito é sempre este: se tiveres uma mistura mais complexa, podes tentar preparar um sistema destes, só que a complexidade do sistema em si acaba por criar grandes limitações, é um facto.
Ok, obrigada.
Não há ninguém?
Helena, eu relativamente a isto e a esta problemática, será que não poderia ser utilizado na indústria têxtil? Por exemplo, eles utilizam corantes com diferentes características, não é?
Sim, foi exatamente esse o exemplo que eu dei.
Pois. Desculpa, não. Sim, tu fizeste uma prova de conceito, mas eu estou a dizer mesmo em termos de aplicação.
Sim. Isso está bonito aí desse lado. Sim, foi uma prova de conceito, no sentido é que nós não temos uma solução real em laboratório com esta mistura de corantes. Mas os 3 corantes que eu apresentei em termos de partição, no último slide, eram precisamente corantes têxteis. Portanto, sim, em termos de corantes, em princípio será a situação mais simples. E de facto foi a situação melhor que nós tivemos, porque eu testei muitas outras misturas.
Está relacionado exatamente com, tu fazes uma prova de conceito, mas é uma questão preocupante a parte da poluição causada pela indústria têxtil.
Sim, com certeza.
Então poderia ser exatamente utilizada nisso.
Sim.
Helena, posso fazer uma pergunta sobre Margarita? Tem a câmera.
Não estou a ouvir, não sei quem está a falar.
Fala mais alto, por favor, Margarita. Ou mais perto do microfone.
Ouvir agora? Está melhor?
Melhor.
Ok. Essa é uma pergunta rápida. Neste caso dos corantes que tu usaste, lá está, eles foram separados diferentemente por causa de terem, a nível de hidrofilicidade e de hidrofilicidade diferente, não é? Ou seja, a diferenciação nesse caso é nesse aspecto, não é? Não necessariamente pelo tamanho, talvez pela cadeia alquílica, não sei bem.
Nada, está só relacionado com o coeficiente de partição octanol água, tanto que nós fizemos testes com muitos outros corantes e, por exemplo, o cloranilic ácido, que particiona entre a fase de líquido iónico e de polímero, como tem um coeficiente de partição no meio dos outros 2, que são extremos, são mesmo extremos para só ficar. Exatamente, são mesmo extremos, ou seja, para eu conseguir pôr um corante na fase de sal, eu tive que ir procurar o corante mais hidrofílico que nós tínhamos em laboratório, porque senão nada ia para a fase de sal. É por isso que é difícil. Provavelmente os corantes são a situação mais interessante de aplicar esses sistemas, porque se pensarmos nas outras misturas...
a nível visual é mais fácil.
Sim, a nível visual, sim. Mas, por exemplo, se nós pensarmos em misturas de, sei lá, vamos pensar, nós fizemos testes em misturas de compostos fenólicos e afins. Eu tive dificuldade em ter extrações completas. Sim, eu tive dificuldade em ter extrações completas para fases, em particular, porque os compostos em si tinham características muito semelhantes, porque são todos
Exatamente.
parecidos, não é? Portanto, os corantes é a situação mais particular, onde podemos ver esta grande distinção entre
Sim, é isso. O problema é mesmo a situação de haver, pronto, mesmo até a nível de biomassas e assim,
Sim.
é o facto de haverem para muita proximidade, então acaba por ser difícil.
Isso.
Mas é super interessante pensar numa aplicação para esses três temas. Se bem que, lá está, mesmo até a nível de separação, acredito que seja difícil, ou seja, eu não sei como é que tu separaste, isso é uma pergunta muito mais prática, mas, ou seja, começaste pela fase bottom, pela fase top, como é que separaste? Seringas?
Se bem me lembro, sim, seringas sempre, e acho que foi bottom, depois a fase do meio e depois a fase
Meio,
topo.
exato,
Sim.
topo.
De qualquer maneira, notem, e é uma nota mesmo, nós só fizemos estes trifásicos com esta mistura, colina, polietilenoglicol e tripotássio de fosfato. Mas as possibilidades são muitas, porque nós sabemos que existem muitos outros compostos que vão cumprir esta característica para formar sistemas multifásicos. E, portanto, dependendo do que... A grande mensagem é precisamente esta. Estes sistemas em particular nós nunca aplicamos numa situação real, vamos dizer assim, ou um exemplo muito prático, mas existem certamente possibilidades e existem formas. Agora, o que dificulta realmente a complexidade dos sistemas.
É isso. Obrigada, Helena. E bom trabalho para a próxima semana.
Mais alguém? Any more questions?
Hi, Helena.
Hello.
Hello. Very nice presentation. I think you remarked on this during your talk, but I think it's worth emphasizing. You start by saying that the ABS opens the possibility for ionic liquid design. You talk about the use of more varied type of ionic liquids. In fact, when you discuss, you show a range of thermoreversible system, but you have essentially two categories. One where the ionic liquid access salt and the thermal reversibility is given by the polymer, rather, and one where the ionic liquid is what is driving this thermal reversibility, no? Through either the charge, if you go from the N444 tetrabutyl ammonium, or if you have a more salt-like N11, something like this, no?
Wait, so you are talking about zwitterines?
In general, so you have one where you have small electro-rich ionic liquids, in which case the thermal reversibility is given by the polymer type, by the non-ionic polymer, and one where you have ionic liquids with large shielded, large apolar regions that shield the cationic charge, which is what drives this phase transition. So in one case, you don't have a lot of options of ionic liquids, if it's the ionic liquid that drive, and the other one, when it's essentially the electrostatic contribution, your range of ionic liquids can be a lot more broad than what you investigated, no?
Yes, I'm not totally sure if I understand completely your question.
No, I'm saying that, for example, even if you look at your zwitterines, when you have the N444 sulfonate, to have this this mechanism that you have, you always need to have the N4 core. Whereas if you have the N111 and you have this LCST behavior with a polymer, no, you can
with the polymer, the N1 works more as a salt.
Yeah, exactly. So which means that your range of zwitterine is much larger than if you want the converse effect for the N444.
Yeah.
And I think this might be worth emphasizing a bit.
Okay, thank you.
But nice otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't say anything wrong on acidic part.
No, it was good. And you did mention it during the acidic ABS, but I think this is a point that is more valid across all the systems you discussed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, anyone else with some last comments for the presentation? Well, Helena, let me just say, I've been keeping up with some of your works and I've seen some of your other presentations. I do think this one was very clear So thank you. Even without fully understanding every little detail of the work, I still got the general ideas. So
thank you, Mari.
I wouldn't change anything per se.
And thank you, everyone, to be present at least, and for the help.
Yes, well, I think we can close this session then, and good luck. I will see you in the conference next week, since I'm also taking part.
So we will see you again.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, and bye-bye to everyone.
Thank you, Helena, again.